Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. We're coming up on one of the 8 Sabbaths of the Pagan Wheel of the Year. And so when we do those, we do a roundtable to discuss the meaning of those holidays and how we celebrate them and what the history is and all that good kind of stuff. So maybe we'll go around first and introduce ourselves. I'm Mark.
I'm Hannah.
You can't see me, but I am Susan.
I'm Michael, or you might see my name come up as Mihal as well. That's the Irish version of my name.
Mm-hmm. Well, welcome to all of you. Thanks so much for coming today. So we're coming up on May Day or Beltane or Beltane or any of a variety of other pronunciations and spellings. Um, and so what does that mean to us? Where, what in the course of the unfolding of the Wheel of the Year, what does that communicate?
Well, I'll go first. For us here in Ohio, that is from a weather standpoint and a climate standpoint, it is the time when it's all in for gardening. It's a little bit too early for maybe tomatoes and really sensitive things, but pretty much everything else is in the ground or about to be in the ground, and it's, flowers are everywhere. It's really, blossoming time, both metaphorically and literally around us. So there's a lot of in our family flower imagery, planting, real focus on being outside and those kinds of things. The rainbow of colors is present to us.
Nice. Hannah, how about you?
Sure, I'll go next. So I live in Tucson, Arizona, and for me, the beginning of May is when it really is starting to feel like summer is beginning. We have over the course of April, it's getting progressively hotter. And so the middle of the day is warm, but our evenings and mornings are still pretty cool. And in May, it's starting to feel like the hot, there's more of that than the colder parts of the entire day. And so it's going to be the time when we start looking for shade everywhere. And we start checking to make sure our air conditioning is functioning. It's still a beautiful time of year. Like this year, we've got a gorgeous spring in the desert. And I would expect that we're going to still see some flowers into May, but it's going to start to, we're all going to have that feeling of brace ourselves. It's coming. The summer, it's here.
Nice. Michael?
For me, I'm living in Iowa, and we're kind of coming up to morel season now. So May 1st is right in the middle of it. So I like the kind of the rain, and it's still cool, and it hasn't gotten too hot yet. But yeah, things start to happen around May. Festival start, the farmers market starts, and things like that, and that's great. But for me as well, it's kind of a chance to connect with Irish folk customs and traditions, and I think that's kind of what I'm really interested in right now. Specifically, I kind of wish St. Patrick's Day was not the Irish national holiday, and maybe one day it won't. I hope. Well, maybe one day it will be Unification Day, will be the national holiday. But through that, I think May Day or Beltane in Irish would be the best national day. There are so many. I think within Irish folk tradition, there are a lot more traditions associated with May Day even than with Samhain. It's a really important day within the calendar year.
For me, I didn't really start celebrating this holiday until I came into the pagan community 30 odd years ago now. And I conceptualized the Wheel of the Year as both the agricultural cycle and as the arc of a human life. So, the spring equinox, for example, is the time of childhood, like maybe up to 11 years old, something like that. And then this holiday is more about young adulthood, kind of late teens, early adulthood. Sexuality comes on, and so that's a theme here. Um, and all that sort of energy and passion that comes with young adulthood, the industry, even though it can be really scattered, there's still that tremendous burst of energy that comes, and I see that happening in the world around me. All the fruit trees are blooming, and the wisteria on our back fence just bloomed, and everything has this beautiful perfumed smell. So it's the time of year when all the plants wave their sexy parts at each other, and so it kind of goes along with all of those themes. The traditional ritual, of course, is the maypole, dancing around a maypole with ribbons depending from the top of the maypole, and that can be a really beautiful, beautiful ritual. With music and with people that and you care about, it can just be a really lovely thing to do. So I encourage people to do that if they can. There's a blog post for how to organize all that, and we'll put it in the show notes down below, so you can see how that works.
Cool.
Oh, go ahead. Michael, would you like to talk about some of the traditions from Ireland?
Yeah, so first of all, just the word. In Irish, it's Beltane. In Scots Gaelic, or Scots Gaelic, it's the Beltane, I think, or Beltane. And that entered Lowland Scots, like the Scots language, in about 500 years ago, maybe in the 15th century, I believe. As Beltane. So Beltane is a Scots word that then entered English. So it's got a long history, and I think you can find the word Beltane in a lot of Scots language poetry throughout the Middle Ages and up to the 18th century as well. And it's still, I think you have things like the Beltane Fire Festival, which is held in Edinburgh every year. I think that's since the 80s that's been held. I don't know. It would be interesting if anybody's listening to this or watching this on YouTube. I'd like to hear what their experiences of the Edinburgh Beltane Fire Festival are. I think one of our community members is actually studying in Edinburgh right now, so maybe they're going to go and check it out. So the maypole in Ireland is an import. It came with the English, so it's mostly in the towns. In the cities, you would find that a strong tradition. Although it's died out in recent years, I don't think it's as strong. But I did watch a video from the 1920s of this giant maypole festival with hundreds of girls going around a pole. It was quite amazing.
Wow.
Maybe several poles in a park and everybody dancing together. It was pretty. What is common is the maybush, which is you take a bough from a tree. I think a whitethorn maybe specifically is the best, but any tree really works. And then you decorate that with ribbons and eggs left over from Easter, painted eggs left over from Easter, and then you decorate with flowers as well. And last year I was considering doing it, but I was like, oh, I don't know where I'm going to get a bough from to this. And I ended up not acting on it, but then there was a big storm on the Beltane Eve, and I came out, and the perfect bough fallen into the ground. It had gone right into the ground.
That's excellent.
I didn't have to do anything.
Here you are.
There's my bow. And so we had the leftover eggs from Easter, the painted eggs, and we put ribbons and everything in it. And that was wonderful. Yeah, so that was great. Another tradition that, so I think that's an easy tradition for people listening to this if they'd like to do something that, I mean, if you're a solitary practitioner or you don't have a big community with you, a maypole might be a bit intimidating, but I think doing a maybush instead is a much simpler and easy thing to do. Another nice tradition is that people would often bathe their faces in the morning dew on the 1st of May. And that's a way of welcoming summer as well. So just go out into your yard and just take up the dew from the grass and then wipe your face with it.
What's dew?
Oh, dew.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, maybe. I guess you don't have much dew in the desert.
Not on May 1st.
Yeah. Also, so when you think of Samhain, you hear this term, the veil between the worlds is thin. And that's kind of a new concept. I read that maybe the first time that phrasing was actually used was only in the 80s. But I know that just that phrasing is new, but the concepts behind it are much older. But I think there's a stronger physicality in tradition than what we're talking about. So physically, the fairies are moving on Samhain and on Beltane. So on Beltane, they're leaving their winter homes, the ring forts and the mounds, and they're moving to their summer homes. So they're out and about and moving, kind of transhumans kind of idea of moving from your summer home to your winter home and then back again. So it's a dangerous night to be out because you don't want to be getting involved with the fairies. You don't want to cross paths with them. So that's another important thing that happens on the night. It's a day when you want to be careful about your butter specifically and dairy overall, because if people are envious of your harvest or your butter or anything, like, it will turn the butter bad for the year. And also it's a time when maybe the fairies might try and steal your butter as well. So there's a lot of charms and spells and things like that associated with the night to keep your belongings safe and your harvest good.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see if there was anything else I wanted to mention. I'll let somebody else speak, and if I can remember anything else, I'll try and back in.
I can go next if you like. I'm excited that you guys are talking about maypoles. I'm actually really stoked because I will have a maypole this year, and it is my Christmas tree. I had a tree for Yule last year, which isn't something that I normally do, but my brother and niece were visiting, and we thought that it would be nice. And a thing that I didn't plan on, but occurred to me afterwards, is that, well, I have this nice tree and I don't want to just throw it out, and I should burn it. And of course I don't have a spot in my house or in my yard that can accommodate an entire tree. So I started taking it apart, and then I realized that I didn't have to do it at just one time, and that I could actually spread it out throughout the year. And so each of the Sabbaths so far since Yule, I've had a fire in which I've burned some of the branches of this tree. And it is now, the branches are done. And so it is just basically a pole. It needs to be spruced up just a little bit. I'm not going to do too much more to it. I like the fact that it is still recognizably a tree trunk, but I will be burying it in the ground. And since I don't think I'm going to be able to convince people to come over and do a maypole dance, I'm probably going to approach it similarly to what Michael was talking about, as far as decorating it, I think I'm going to use some ribbons, and I'm going to use some flowers. And I haven't yet. I like to be spontaneous with these things and just have the most general idea, and let what's around me speak to me when I'm getting into the details of it. But I'm very excited about this. It's a great example of where if you overplan things, sometimes you miss out on some opportunities. And in this case, just the sense of, I want to do something more with this tree. I don't want to just discard it the way that we discard things in this culture, has given me this experience of weaving in a sense of sacredness that is connected with each of the Sabbaths. And so it's going to kind of meet its peak here with the maypole, I think, and then I'm going to be whittling that down into pieces and burning the pieces and have it be completely finished by next Yule. So I'm excited about that. The other thing that I did want to mention, because I have a partner who is from the former Soviet Union, he's from Ukraine. And when we were talking about Beltane, he's not at all familiar with Beltane as a pagan holiday, but he's very familiar with May Day as a day of international solidarity for workers. And so I thought it would be interesting to point out the way that holidays are layered together. And Michael and I were discussing this right before we started recording. There's only so much space on the calendar. And so it's very common for culture to take an already existing holiday or time of year that has traditions that are important to people and attach additional associations to that. And so the International Workers' Day of Solidarity is older than the Soviet Union, but it was really a big deal in the Soviet Union. And so it has these layers. It has the layer of socialism with a small s, we might say. And that is something that is observed in this country to a reason, it's not huge, but it's definitely there. And then that has an additional layer for former Soviet countries and other communist countries of being an ideological and sort of nationalistic celebration on top of that. And so, yeah, there are many layers sometimes to these observations.
Sure. And of course, those layers sometimes come from different places as well. I mean, one of the things about being in the US, because it's a nation primarily made up of immigrants, is that these stories and traditions get brought from all over the place, and then they start getting mixed up with one another. I know that one of the things that's been very traditional for the pagan festivals that I've been to is on the night before May Day to have a big bonfire, and to kind of keep the fairies away, right? To keep us safe and warm, and so there's dancing and drinking, and people go off in the woods and have sex and all that kind of stuff. And it's just a very merry, somewhat primal kind of time. And what it does is there's this sort of feeling of emotional openness that arrives at the dawn. You've been up kind of keeping this fire going all night, and and the sleep deprivation definitely has something to do with it, where you become more emotionally vulnerable. But then when the dawn comes up and there's dew on the grass and everything is green and there's flowers, and it just gives you this moment of, wow, how beautiful this world is. And so that's been my experience of a lot of these kinds of festivals.
Yeah, there's definitely a feeling of we made it. Even it's not as bad as Tucson, but in Ohio, there's the spring and the fall are very much transitions from winter to summer and vice versa. They're very short. And for example, today when we're recording, it's April, and it was almost 80 today here. So it's definitely that feeling of, oh my goodness, we're surrounded by this beauty all of a sudden, and it can be sort of I don't want to say an overwhelming feeling, but it is very sudden and striking sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
On the topic of bonfires,
Ah.
yeah, in the group I shared an idiom from the Irish language a couple of days ago. So it's Idir Ghahina Beltane, between two Beltane fires. So it's kind of like I'm in a dilemma, or I'm between a rock and a hard place. That's what it means.
Wow.
I like that.
It comes from because traditionally farmers would have made two bonfires, and driven their cattle between the two fires to purify them and keep them safe for the coming year, and then of course for the fairies. And I'm sure the cattle enjoyed it a lot. Two bonfires, because I think they also singed their tails for good luck as well, which I'm sure the cattle enjoyed. So yeah, bonfires are a big part of it as well. And it was quite nice. I saw the movie The Northman last year, which is set in Iceland, and they actually have a kind of a May Day festival where all the couples go into the woods and they're all wearing their flower crowns and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a tradition of mine also, is to watch The Wicker Man on May Day as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how I got into all this, through my love of folk horror movies. That's how I all got into this, and so it's a nice tradition to watch The Wicker Man every year. And it's actually the 50th anniversary of the release of The Wicker Man this year, in 1973. So I think they're going to be releasing a 4K edition of it later this year. So keep an eye out for that.
Wow.
So
and has that been fully reconstructed now? Have they put all the footage that was originally cut out when it was released back into it at this point?
So I got a version of the DVD with those outtakes in about 2003, I think. And I think they added them in, but they were so deteriorated in the version I saw. I just thought there was no way to seamlessly reincorporate them. They're very they're not great, and they don't really add much to the story anyway. I don't think they're necessary. I don't think they're really necessary.
I know Christopher Lee was very upset about the cuts. He had a lot of attitude about it.
He spent a lot of time talking about that in the director's commentary.
So go ahead, Hannah.
Oh, I was just going to say another thing related to you guys talking about dew that got me thinking about the fact that another significant aspect of entering this time of year for us here in the desert is that it is the driest part of our year. And so it probably doesn't begin exactly on May 1st, but that's right in the foreview for us. That time of year is when our intermittent flowing water will start to get lower and lower. And then usually by June, they will be dry. Mm-hmm. And it's, because of the temperature and the fact that we have this bimodal rain pattern. So we have winter rains, and then we have monsoon rains later on in the summer that get going about at the beginning of July. This in-between period is the driest time of the year for us. And so now that that's occurred to me, I'm thinking that doing something ritually with that would be nice. A sort of nod to the contrasts, because we're always celebrating the rain and we're very excited about it. But this is the other side of that. The dry period is part of this world that I live in, and it's worth acknowledging and sitting with.
I wanted to put in a shout out for consent. If you're going to have a holiday around sexuality, then you got to talk about consent. I think the pagan community has a very spotty record historically around that issue. I also, from what I can see, it's getting a lot better. But the easiest way to really introduce a safe environment for everybody to play in is to make sure that everybody has a clear understanding of what constitutes consent and makes sure that they affirmatively have it before initiating any kind of contact with another person. So just wanted to make sure that that got into the mix.
Do you have thoughts on what that looks like from a practical perspective in a ritual setting? Is it laying out the terms ahead of time and then having something like safe words, or
It's both. And people can do this sort of red, yellow, green sort of thing. Sometimes I've seen people like wearing a ribbon, that's like red, yellow, green, stuff like that. But in a ritual context, I actually created a ritual game called the Consensual Pomander Ball. It's this fun, flirty sort of game where you make a pomander ball, which is an orange studded with cloves, and the orange gets passed from person to person, and each person takes out a clove, and the game is over when the cloves are all gone. But what you can do is you can give the orange to a person, the pomander ball, and request some kind of interaction, any kind of interaction, whatever it is that you feel comfortable asking for. And then the person can say no, they can say yes, they can make a counter proposal. And then you do that, and then that person has the pomander ball, and they go to another person and do the same thing. So it's a way of kind of ritually modeling what consent is about, in a way that's fun and flirty, and where there's going to be plenty of saying no, there's going to be plenty of saying yes, and nobody has to take it very personally. Somewhere, well, it's going to be in my new book that's coming out next year, but somewhere on the blog there is a description of this game. I'm sure I can dig it out.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So where are we?
I'd like to share a little quote from this book.
Oh, great.
Nosana agus Pishoga na Yale, which is the Nosana means customs, and Pishoga is a more complicated word than the English translation. It's can mean superstition or charm or spell. It can be a lot of different things.
Okay.
So this is about May Day. So, to judge by the hundreds of customs and beliefs which were associated with May Day, it must have been the most important annual festival in ancient Ireland. Both the eve of May Day and the day itself were important as signifying the start of summer and the coming in of the milk and butter produce, which were staple foods for our forefathers. Almost every custom and belief associated with them seems to have sprung from the need people felt to protect their livestock and preserve their luck at this crucial time. Summer was welcomed in by the carrying of green branches and flowers into the house or strewing them about the doors and windows. A description of the precautions taken to protect livestock at the time of year would fill a large volume. Holy water was, of course, sprinkled on the byre and cows in later times, but older precautions involved the recitation of charms, driving the cattle between blazing bonfires, and the tying of rings of rowans on the animals' tails. Red ribbons were attached to the manes and the harnesses of horses too. And let's see, being associated with a Céin Féile, a chief festival, so Samhain, Beltane, those are the chief festivals. May Eve and May Day were supposed to be a time of greater than usual activity among supernatural beings. Everlius, or Ferryfort in Ireland, was said to be open that night, and their inhabitants moved abroad in great numbers, often changing their residence at that time. Thus, people were loath to be out late on May Eve, and many stories were told of the strange experiences of those who took the risk. There you go.
Cool. That's somewhat different than like in France and in England, where the tradition on May Day Eve was for young couples actually to go out into the woods.
Yeah.
As opposed to like staying close to a fire in a house and staying safe.
Yeah. It was a time of divination as well, so you'd stay inside and do divination things. So yeah, very similar to Samhain in that way.
I like that balance between, those two halves of the year. I know, hearing that now, it brings them a little bit more, or brings them balance in a different way than what I'm used to, which is balance in terms of polar opposites, but now that brings them more into balance as in ways that they're more similar. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Traditionally as well, it would have been a time when people would have taken their their livestock up into the mountains as well. This was around May 1st. That was when you bring them up into the mountains. And I was just reading about it earlier today. People would have gone and lived with their animals up in the mountains. And this tradition lasted right up in some areas of Ireland right up until the 1900s, where you would have, and it was a real time of independence, especially for young women. They were allowed to go up there by themselves and take care of the animals, and so they had the sense of independence, and they weren't being watched all the time. Apparently, there's a lot of stories of women after they got married just lamenting the fact that they lost that independence that they had when they were up there. It was a time when there was a lot of partying up in the mountains, with the parents weren't watching them. So
which fits nicely with what Mark was saying about thinking about it as a celebration of adolescence and coming into adulthood. I like that those things layer together nicely in that reflection. What that reminds me of, I really got a strong recollection of Bill and Thomas's play Under Milkwood. You know, there's some scenes in that, and there's a young female character who's out in the out with the kine, I guess, and is very capturing that that feeling and that attitude very well, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's it's obviously a big deal in modern paganism. This and Hallows or Samhain are the biggest holidays, and it's interesting because there really is no, at least in the United States, there's no secular corollary, because we've pushed Labor Day into September, and so there isn't any kind of mainstream celebration going on at the same time, while it's really important for those of us that are following and developing pagan paths. But anybody else have more that they want to offer, or should we wrap up?
Well, we actually have a couple of festivals around here. So there's a place with a large German community. Well, previously large German community. So they do have a Germanic style May Day festival. And there's a Dutch town, and they have tulip time. So
nice.
All the tulips are growing. So they have a nice big festival for that too.
Nice. Yeah, the Germans, they make the same beer twice a year, and it's called Märzen, which literally means March, March beer, in the springtime, and then it's the same beer that they use for Oktoberfest in October. So that's another, one of those both ends of the year kind of things.
It's fun too. I wanted to, this is a diversion from beer, but I wanted to, before we wrapped up, talk about in our household, because, we have a young one, a lot of the sexuality and fertility part of, May Day is sort of toned down for us. Sure. Outside of, hey, what are those birds doing over there? We don't really get into it so much with our 6-year-old. Other than, a learning experience about what is pollination, how does this happen? How does, where are the baby birds coming from? How does our food come to be from this time of year? We actually talked about it today because we're expecting some maybe snow on Tuesday. So we're going from this really warm weather to this really cold temperature, and we have fruit trees, and we were talking to her about how, we're hoping that doesn't ruin the fruit crop. So we started talking about how the flowers get pollinated and things like that. And so it's a little bit of a learning piece. But for family activities, we I've mentioned this on some of the other videos. We try to have the solstices and equinoxes be we give gifts to our child at that time. We try not to put as much emphasis on winter solstice, just to make it more equal throughout the year. Doesn't always work out though, but and then on Samhain and Beltane and Imbolc and others, we try and have those be giving back holidays. And so we didn't end up getting to it this year, but so for example at the equinox we might plant seeds and then give the flowers away, the potted flowers away at Beltane. So we might just go buy them this year since we did not succeed in planting any this year, but we try to have that as a way to give back and have that balance between the holidays. And something we sometimes do, since we don't have a maypole activity around us available, what we'll do instead, and we actually did this, we do this sometimes at equinox also, is we'll take ribbons. And the reason we do this at equinox too is because it's more of an intention setting activity, but because of the ribbon imagery, we sometimes will do it at May Day too, is to braid different ribbons of different colors together, with associating a wish or an intention with each of the colors. And then you can set it out on a tree, which would really will work well with a maybush. Set it out, and as the wind blows and unbraids the thing that you did, it sort of sets your intentions or your wishes out into the world. Is some of the things that I recommend for kids, because it's an easy activity and it's got all the bright colors and imagery. Or making flower crowns too is a fun one.
That's lovely. I love that idea.
Yeah, I'm probably going to steal it.
I stole it from someone at my UU church, so
excellent.
The chain of wonderful stealing.
This is my I don't know if I shared this in the last roundtable I was in, but this is my go-to book for all of these things. So celebrating
Nice.
Irish festivals. It's out of print now, but I'm sure you can still find it online, and it's not too expensive. But it's got some really great activities, especially children's activities for Beltane. But it also shares one of the interesting divination techniques that for May Day. And so what you do is on May Day morning, before the sun has risen, go to the garden and find a small slug. Put the slug on a plate dusted with flour and cover the plate with a large cabbage leaf. Leave it covered until after sunrise. The slug's trail in the flour will define your true love's initials.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hearing that really brings home to me how the immigrant culture of the US has held on to some things while losing their sources, because that sounds exactly like Ozark hedge magic to me. Very much the same idea. Lots of ways of divining one's true love's initials in those bits of folklore.
But I think just if you want to do something and for May Day, and you're just not really sure what to do, I think I'd love to see people try the Maybush. I think it's a simple thing to do, and I'd love to see some photographs on the Facebook page if people posted their Maybushes. And also, I think if you just want to do the dew, washing your face with the dew, that's another simple thing to do as well. And there's not a lot of prep involved, and you can do it very discreetly as well.
Isn't that supposed to stave off aging?
I think so.
Preserve beauty, I think.
Yes, yeah. Or I just like to think of it as like taking the first day of summer and becoming part of it.
Nice. I love that. Well, this has been a great conversation. I hope that our viewers are going to have a wonderful May Day, however you celebrate it. And if you haven't, please hit subscribe and like the video. That helps unlock features on YouTube that we don't have access to right now. So that would be helpful for us. And I really want to thank the three of you for coming together today to have this conversation.
Always a pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Have a wonderful May Day, folks.
You all as well.